Today's show is brought to you in partnership with Clearmotive Marketing. I co-founded this high-impact creative agency over 15 years ago. We deliver marketing that matters to our clients through our three-pillar approach. Number one, research that delivers actionable insights. Two, creative that attracts and engages new customers. And three, which is the backbone of our client success, the people, process, and technology that ensure efficient, consistent, high-quality results. We have great ideas and incredible creative, which is expected from a national agency. What makes us different is that we also simplify workflow, use technology to speed up projects, and recommend activities that achieve higher returns. There is a mountain of work that happens behind the scenes to produce what our clients take for granted, and that's exactly how we want it. Because great creative combined with well-organized operations is why we have such long-standing relationships. For example, Honda Canada has renewed their contract with us annually for the last 12 years. Our clients are market leaders, so they're incredibly competitive. Efficiency, performance, and consistent results are the only way to get to the top and to stay there. If you're not getting the consistent results you need, I can help. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or check out clearmotive.ca. Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest this morning, Mr. Steve Brierley. How are you doing, Steve?
Very good, thanks. Really nice to be here.
Thanks for coming on, man. We got introduced as we do, One Degree of Separation, Calgary Conspires, I think Rod Miller, and then since then, a couple people I've heard your name since. It's just funny how once you start banging into the Venn diagram starts overlapping, it gets real small really quick, which I do think is the superpower of the biggest small town ever, which is Calgary. I'm going to warn my audience before we get started. We often talk about startups and funding and the journey towards. We're going to take a little bit, and we're going to back into it actually from the other side. We're going to talk a little bit about the exit strategy or whatever that looks like. But the big word that I find completely needs a redefinition, which is retirement. So you are, by self-diagnosed, living your best life. So let's unpack that. I usually put people in the elevator to give me a little bit of their pitch of who they are and what they do. So let's do it with that big banner of retirement floating over the conversation.
Absolutely. When it came up, I was shocked that all of a sudden I'm in the retirement zone, but spent my entire life working in a corporate sector, post-secondary as well. And then all of a sudden here I am, looking at the end of my corporate life and wondering, what am I going to do? I didn't want to stop working. And to be honest, culturally, if you don't retire, you're kind of thought of as a bit of a loser in a way. Now, it's like, oh, what, you can't retire? I mean, and then you hear people, I retired at 40 or 50.
So it's either this weird badge of honor when it happens early, or you F something up if it happens too late, right? There's a weird little sweet spot that
absolutely.
But you're right. I have so many friends, retired at 40, looking for new opportunities. And it's like, oh, wow, how did you do it? Versus like, oh, you're still working? What's wrong with you? Like the psychology around it is very toxic, actually.
It absolutely is. A big eye opener for me was 2 years ago, I went to the Junior Achievement Business Hall of Fame dinner. So I'm sitting in this room with 700 people, billionaires, local Calgary people. And looking around and realizing that all of the people there who were starting new businesses were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And what was the consistent thing? For me, it was like, these are all higher performing people who would never retire because they're doing what they love. And, that was really the driver for me and all of us to realize, hey, I don't have to retire. I can do a startup now. I can do multiple startups. I'm hearing about startups in Calgary. There's a woman, Marjorie Zingle, 84, starting a new data analytics company. I know her story, yes. Incredible. And so I thought, well, if it's good for them, and maybe it's good for me, and what do I need to do to change my mindset to think about it that way?
And I've been in that room. That's a vibrant group of individuals. When it comes to like the age becomes quickly irrelevant. It's like, oh, you're what age? It's like, no, you're you, and this is what you're doing. The age almost becomes more of like, well, the 84 story, it becomes extra cool because you are 84. Like, was that, just thinking about that room, was that also a little bit about giving yourself permission to think about it differently?
It absolutely was. And you know what, prior to that, I'd heard about it, you read about it, but you're looking around and realizing I'm watching these icons in Calgary walking through, and they're not stopping. They're doing something new. They're doing something creative. And I honestly thought I want to be that person. So I want to, whatever it's going to take, I'm going to make it happen to become that person.
Well, already just changing your mindset, you become that person. Let's talk a little bit about, like I've read, in other conversations, retirement, where it came from, think it was originally in Germany, and it was originally brought in as a mandatory at a certain age because they had workforce problems getting young people in the work. Like even sometimes understanding, like we sometimes latch on to something so closely without actually, or intimately without actually knowing the origins of it, going,
Mm.
oh, that's not what I thought. I don't know. Anything you want to share around just kind of how we even got to thinking about it the way we do in Western or even global culture?
It's good. It's a good question. And for me, I think of it really, it aligned a lot with a corporation. I think of my grandfather, and who worked at a company for 35 years, retired, got a watch, the classic
The gold
retirement,
watch.
right?
Yeah.
And, and when I was in my early 20s, that was the plan. I remember my parents said, "Well, find a good job, retire," and then nothing was ever discussed about what happens after retirement. It's like you're going to sit around and do nothing, basically. So I think,
And kind of waste away, which we can talk about some of the stats around that, which is
absolutely, yeah.
scary of what happens if you don't have if you're not an active participant in it.
Absolutely. And then, I think some of the new things that are happening that I've seen in my corporate life is people are retired early and not on their own. It's not their option,
Mm.
right?
It wasn't their
So,
idea.
yeah. So there's like lots of variations of it. There's of course the people that retire early. There's the Freedom 55 myth, I think.
Hmm.
It's a financial myth for most people. And I'm going to say that retirement is changing. Here's an interesting stat I just read recently. One of the fastest growing demographics for new employment is 75 plus
Wow.
in Canada.
Hmm.
A- there's a lot of reasons for this, but it's interesting that that started every day in the paper. By the way, there's some kind of story about people not retiring, and sometimes it's because they can't, but sometimes it's they choose not to.
The can't Freedom 55, like that. I think that was a that was a campaign by by an investment company, I
It,
believe, or
it, it
like
was a Canadian
it
company.
wasn't
Yeah,
for the betterment of society. I'm a marketer. I love a good campaign, but some really stick, right?
that
Freedom
did.
55 really stick is for so many people that you encounter, even in your own conversations, even your own dialogue with your friends, your peer group. Is it often come down to that dollar? Like if I can't, geez, the second I can, I will, because doing nothing and just sailing off or doing whatever is the goal. But finances is always seems to be the fear that people, well, Canadians don't have enough to retire, and that narrative is plugged all the time.
It absolutely is. Well, here's some interesting data right now. Average Canadian couple retires on 69,000 net per year. Average single person 31,000. So, I mean, it may seem like a lot of money, but it's not. If you want to
Mhm.
retire in 70 grand, there's two of you, you're not traveling. Like, there's no way you're traveling overseas, or you're not buying a boat. you know,
Yeah, you're not
um,
fitting. You're not. It doesn't look like that poster on the Freedom 55 ad.
not at all. There's a percentage of people that absolutely are living that lifestyle, but you know what? The average Canadian is not doing that, and I think a lot of Canadians right now are retiring to poverty, and it means different things to different people, of course.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of pressures going on right now. Things we're thinking about, like there's a lot of pressure right now for seniors to get reverse mortgages to get money for their homes. Right? I know of a couple that ran out of money after they did that, and now they've lived too long. In other words, um, and there's also a lot of financial person have friends who have retired and they become so, I'm going to say, almost paranoid about running out of money because they stop
yeah.
doing things. And
Well, and
it's
there's also you get less busy and less things to focus on, and
yeah,
sometimes those things distract, and you get too hyper focused, and
you absolutely do.
that can be unhealthy as well.
It sure can. So yeah, it's multi-layered, but I think the bottom line here is that we're really starting a new way of looking at retirement, and people are thinking about it differently, and we're hoping,
Well, it
really
sounds like
hoping that
there's
the
an
message
appetite. Like know your audience, right? At the end of the day, and it sounds like there's an audience that's
absolutely.
like, hey, I don't like that old formula of like I sail off into the sunset and sit on the porch and wait to die kind of thing. And it's a little bit like that. I
Exactly.
think unfortunately, most people listening know a story of someone who like worked, did the thing, and like they followed kind of the social contract. They retired, and 6 months later they passed away, or a year later they
Absolutely.
passed away. Like that feels like they got ripped off on
But
that journey. Like they bought the story and it didn't work out.
I know people like that, and like it's like sudden death after retirement. It's
Isn't there some
for
crazy? Isn't there's some stats on that? I think in our first call you shared some stats on that.
Yeah, there really are, and it's not really defined science just yet, but There's
Okay.
typically here's one within 14 months of retirement. If you don't use your brain, you start to lose your cognitive ability, and so
Basically like working out. You miss a gym for a week, you start to
exactly.
lose, you lose strength, right? It's literally the
Yeah,
same, use it or lose it.
and but on that other concept of sudden death after retirement, this is more anecdotal, but I actually know people. I've worked with people who were so excited about retirement. One guy in particular, he died 30 days after he retired, and he worked so hard, putting in the 12, 14-hour days, and he was a
Yeah,
lawyer.
he did all the right things in air
Yeah,
quotes,
yeah,
literally.
he did,
Yeah.
and
So
it's sad.
So if you were going to just for fun, because you've got the mic, you are my de facto expert. So if you were going to
Okay.
redefine even the word retirement, let's not throw the word away. Let's just redefine it for starters. How would you even redefine it from that perspective? Because I think we've all identified, yeah, it's not working, and I don't want that version of it. Let's talk about firstly how to redefine it, and then maybe some of the things like purpose or understanding what matters to you that are required to then kind of formulate maybe another phase of life. So
Yeah.
how would you define retirement in a more beneficial way?
And that's a great question. I think, part of it is looking at it as a working flexible phase where
Mhm.
you identify something you love to do and you either want to get paid or you don't care. And you focus your passion and energy in that area. And I think it's like, let's not look at retirement like things stop. Let's look at it like things change and transition. And maybe, I mean, I've met so many people the past year who have done that, and it's so inspiring. I was talking to a guy 2 days ago. They were talking about retirement. He's 74. He's running a business here in the United Kingdom, and he would never retire. So I think part of it is, like you said earlier, there's a mindset, and what do I need to do to change my mindset? But it can't happen at 65 though. It's got to happen earlier.
You got to do the work in it. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta
When
you gotta think about
when
it.
I get there, I'll figure it out. That's a bit of a danger zone, right?
It absolutely is because I think sometimes it's too late. And so that's one thing. Here's another interesting data point in Alberta. There's 820,000 people between the ages of 50 and 65. Um, and the fastest growing demographic is over 55. The younger demographics are getting smaller. So there's a large group of people that are um, kind of entering that zone where maybe their traditional corporate roles would end, but
Mhm.
maybe they can do a startup. Maybe they can start a business. Maybe they can go run a bookstore. Maybe they can volunteer. It's really about choosing what you want to do. I heard a great line. This was at the Junior Achievement Dinner, by the way. I love this line. There's a guy who started Serve Pro in Calgary. He's
Mhm.
90, and his friend says to it, "When are you going to retire?" And he says, "Well, what's retirement?" His friend says, "Well, it's when you do things you like to do." He goes, "Well, I guess I'm retired." And that's like he's 90, and it's like wears a suit and tie. He would never stop doing what he loves. And I think we need to start thinking about it 65. So back to your question. It's a transition. It's the
Yeah.
transition from your traditional corporate life maybe to something else. And it doesn't have to be a paid gig. It can be volunteer. It can be hanging out. It can be mentoring. I mean, there's so many, but it's keeping yourself active.
I love I read an article years ago and it was talking about the misrepresentation of work-life balance that you need to try to
Yeah.
fit it all into the day. I need to do family and the article kind of talked about it. It said, no, your life has phases. You have the learning phase, you have the earning phase, you have the family phase. But they talked about it if you balance it out and think and are really clear what phase you're in. Like I'm in the accumulating some wealth phase, and that was like from early 30s into like maybe 50. Then I get
Mhm.
into like, oh, I've got some wealth preservation, but I still need to move into different areas and maybe community. And they broke it out on a much longer timeline. They said what really burns people out is going, oh my God, I have to do all the things in the same day or the same week. And when I'm on the golf course, I'm stressed about work. When I'm at work, I want to be on the golf course. Like that's what actually crushes us is
Yeah.
this myth that
Yeah.
it's supposed to be superhuman and happen all at once. I really loved it when they talked about phasing life out, which is what I'm kind of hearing you say a little bit. Like it's just entering a different phase, which work flexible. I do what I want, when I want, how I want. Maybe there's revenue attached. And I know some older guys that they work at Home Depot. They're not doing it for the money. They do it because they actually love it. They meet people. They love all the gadget stuff. They get discounts on all the stuff they need to buy for their hobbies. And it's easy to look at that on the outside of like, oh, geez, didn't you used to be COO or something? And like, yeah, and I did that, and it served its purpose. And now I'm actually doing something just because for fun, and it pays for groceries or whatever the case may be. But it's easy to kind of look down on that until you maybe understand it a little bit more.
It is. We were laughing about this the other day, talking about changing the terminology. And when someone says they're retiring, maybe we say now we celebrate them. Maybe we need to say like, oh, too bad. Sorry to hear you're retiring.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear. It's more like, oh, cool. That's great. What's next? Like actually get right into that versus not what you're leaving, but what are you going to, right?
Yeah. If you look around, high performing individuals don't retire. They just keep going. I mean, look at the entertainment industry. They look at the Rolling Stones. They're 80. They're still jamming, right? And
defying science in some ways, but that's another story.
There's some help, I'm sure, there.
Living proof that you can abuse yourself to no end and still make it to 80 if you've got enough money to pay for enough medical support, full blood transfusions on a daily basis, or
that's
whatever.
Why they're doing the tour. But I think it's all around us, but we haven't really recognized it the way we probably should. We think it's for other people. And Calgary is such a great area or city for this. You look at some of the people who have started businesses and especially in tech right now, there's a lot of tech startups that are being started up by people that have retired. Maybe they're putting money in, it's
I think the average age of tech founder in Calgary is even like mid 40s or something. Like it shocked me when I heard the number. Yeah, it gets portrayed in the media, which that's never misleading, as this young, Mark Zuckerberg in the dorm room kind of thing. But when you look at the real numbers, it's not that at all. Actually, it's individuals, and I know with the downturn in oil and gas, there was lots of highly skilled individuals with a little bit of capital behind them that said, well, if this industry is no longer going to serve me the way it has, maybe I'm going to go do my own thing. A lot of those individuals were older. In that journey. And sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. They ended up going back into corporate. But, is there also a fear around this, just even we got to clear the way. We got to let these younger generations come in. We've got to retire people out. And as I'm running a big corporation and I'm looking at cutbacks, those bigger salaries get on my radar, right?
Absolutely.
And I've got a huge liability from a pension perspective. I've got all the things that I've got to go, whoa, I need to deal with that. Like there's so much more to that than just, oh, you're getting older, Freedom 55. There are some very just almost sociopathic company decisions that get made around, well, this is just the numbers and these numbers cost us more than this number. So let's move these out down the cycle. Like there is part of it that is, we're victim a little bit of just the business case sometimes.
We absolutely are. And I think that's why you have to be prepared. And so if you wait till you're 55 and you're getting walked out the door, you're going to have a challenge. However, if it's top of mind for you and you start to cultivate maybe something you love to do, or and then you just do it. And if the transition happens, maybe you change your direction, but you do something that you love to do. I mean, I've just in my life been so lucky that I've seen people do this who have come out the other side and are incredibly happy. And
best thing ever happened to me kind of storyline. Right?
And and it took me like 20 years to realize this, to be honest. Like I saw this all around me and it never stuck with me. And now I think I'm just attracting it somehow, but I'm hearing these stories.
You're putting it out. Yeah. The universe is when you put that frequency out to the world.
Yeah.
I had a friend who used to work in career transition, and he said the hardest ones were the mid 50s males where they got terminated. And he was brought in as the follow-up kind of guy with the career coaching, the transition. And he's like, for some of the more senior, we had an office set up. We had fake business cards made. We had a new cell phone because so much of their identity and who they were was that role or that plaque on the door or that corner office or that any office. And to even allow them to move forward, they had to prop up so much of, oh, okay, I didn't actually have my whole identity ripped out from under me. Right. And, and even though it was contrived and it was a little bit Hollywood actually in a way, that's what was required for them to even be able to think about what comes next. So let's not pretty it up here. Talk to me about doing the work. I'm in my job and I'm going forward, like how important it is, and you've talked about it even on our first call, purpose and what really matters to me. And that feels like something that can get kicked down the road until all of a sudden you get the kick and you haven't done that work. So talk to me about that. And do we shy away from it? Are we being a little bit, is it scary? Is it a bit soft terminology for some, especially certain age groups maybe?
Yeah, I think it's, it's good. It's scary. And I think for Well, here's apparently about 15% of people in North America have identified their purpose. Excuse me. So it's not a common practice. And I think it is scary because wouldn't the worst thing be that if you're in your 50s and you look at your purpose and you realize you've been living a lie for 40 years or 35
Mm.
years, let's say. But if you do identify your purpose and you find out what the next step should be, that is an incredible feeling. I went through that process and it was a life, as corny as it sounds. It was
Was that
life.
soul searching, going walking in the woods, going to see a shaman, or was it a focused? You went and you actually took a course, or you got someone from the outside to help you. Like, what was your journey around that?
You know,
Maybe all of the above. All of the
yeah,
above.
well, a bit of it was a gentleman that I know who also, by the way, is 80, just started a new consulting company in the States. He said, "Have you ever
You're
thought
hanging
about?"
out with some inspiring
Oh my God,
individuals.
yeah,
Like, that doesn't hurt, right?
yeah. And he
Now you're
says,
trying to keep up to them, and they're 80. That's awesome.
and I can't, not even close. But he says, "You
That's
know what?
awesome.
Have you ever thought about your purpose?" He said, "Why don't you come and do it? We're going to have a retreat." So it's in Vermont, and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna." So I fly to
Oh,
Vermont.
Vermont's a beautiful part. I grew up in Quebec.
Oh,
Vermont's a beautiful part of the world too, to go hang out in the woods
absolutely.
and do your thing. Yeah, yeah.
Well, you would
Vermont's
have
awesome.
loved it because so we're driving through this, farm area. All of a sudden, there's this incredible building. It's a retreat center. I walk into this building. There's 12 other people there, CEOs and presidents of major organizations in the U.S. I'm very intimidated, by the way. And so
Yeah,
I go
imposter
in.
syndrome. Like, why am I here? Who am
Oh
I? Why should I be in
yeah.
this room? Like, I can feel that already. Just hear you say
Oh,
it.
it was hard, and plus I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I for 2 days
You can't escape.
I can't escape. There's no escaping. Of course, they can never find me either if they happen to lose me. But so for 2 days, really, I went through a process, and it's really about identifying what I value, what are some of the passions, and what are some of the talents I have, and where I want to go with that. And so I did that, and it was very disruptive, by the way, because it made me change the current role I was in, which was very stable and well paying to something I wanted to be in the sport. I wanted to be around sports. So I ended up joining Canadian Tire and Sport Check and doing their corporate executive development. But I got to wear shorts to work. I was hanging around with Olympic athletes. Um, and I versus working in maybe a very highly structured environment. So
Right.
that happened, and then from then I realized that I wanted to help people. So went back to school. I got some more information about how I could help, and here I am. It's like 8 years later, and I like it. It
I was
took
just
me
say,
a
how
bit of
long ago
time.
was that? 8 years.
Yeah, 8 years. But I got as soon as I got back from Vermont, I jumped into it. So, um, and I'm going to say it was by accident that I did this, by the way, but I can't stop talking about it. I actually teach a course on how to do this. There's a book called The Power of Purpose by an author named Richard Leider out of the U.S. And I've done it with my son, who's in his early 20s, and my wife has done it as well. It really is like, so once you've identified, let's say, your purpose, then you can say, okay, what do I need to do to work it and do that every day? So
Yeah. What does that
that's
look like from a high level? Do you
yeah.
find, like, just referencing your son, do you think that we've got future generations that will be 60 one day that are going to be better prepared for this? Because it feels like a relatively new narrative where your son, and I think in his early 20s, purpose and why and what matters to me, like even the way my niece and nephew talk about what they want to do in their careers, there's a deeper level there
Oh
that you
yeah.
don't always hear with my 45 or 50-year-old friends that are like, it's dollars and cents. I got to get the next deal. I got to get the exit. There is often more of a money conversation, not nothing good or bad, but
Mhm.
my niece and nephew in their early 20s talk, you can hear it. They just talk differently. Mhm.
My son does that too. And for him, it's
Yeah.
like I want to do what I want to do, not going to settle. And I want to enjoy my life. And I was the exact opposite. Just like you said, how do I get a paycheck? And what will it look like 10 years from now? I have no idea. But as long as I'm getting paid, I'll be good. I
And that was
think,
a little bit of the narrative, right?
yeah, I think the future is looking really positive, by the way, when it comes to the concept of purpose and work and what it should look like for you. Really do.
Mm. So if I'm listening to this and I'm in my late 40s or early, it's funny when we talk about 55. I just turned 50 a few weeks ago. So we're like, oh,
Congratulations.
55. And all of a
You're,
sudden, thank you. I made it this far and
you're
it's never
part of
been
a
better.
you're part of a very big demographic. There's 820,000 of you.
No,
So.
I'm like, I am in that demographic. That, sometimes when you're like, again, when you're marketing and there's this demographic and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, that's me. Actually, I'm in that demographic. That feels weird to me because I don't associate. I don't know. I think we always look to older as something different than when we got there.
Oh,
I did.
Absolutely.
I'm like, what is this? I don't think this is what 50 looked like when I was 30 looking at 50. And anyways, that's it. We won't talk about that. But, the, is purpose that first step, or is it just going, hey, you know what? There's other options for me. Because sometimes we feel like right back to the beginning of the call, being in that room at Junior Achievement, and I moderated the announcement ceremony for that. So I'm very familiar with that group.
No way.
And
Okay.
I love, when they did it at the Petroleum Club and I wasn't in town, I wasn't able to make it to the dinner. So I love to hear you talk about it. So I got to meet those individuals and just kind of be part of that whole journey. It's very inspiring. And none of them were young. There was one, Brianne, I think, who was young. And that was kind of an anomaly for the organization to actually bring a younger person to the table versus the 70, 80, 90-year-old crowd, which was amazing.
Yeah.
You gave yourself permission. Is that the first step? Like if you're talking with someone and what do I do and how do I do it? It sounds fluffy, but that really does to me sound like step one.
It is. It's that reflection. It's like looking back and looking at your amazing life and what did you do and what were some of the high points, and then really gathering that information and taking that and pushing it forward. So it does.
It's kind of like what have you done so far? Not even what have you done. What have I done so far? I've got to hear, but man, I'm really excited. Have you heard of? I think it's called the end of history phenomenon. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't. No.
Heard this on a TED Talk years ago. And the concept is if you ask someone, Steve, like how much have you changed in the last 10 years? Like you 10 years ago to now, significant change, totally different person.
Oh yeah, 180. Well, completely different.
But often when you ask people, how are you going to be 10 years from now? They're often like, well, yeah, kind of who I am now. Like I've kind of arrived. Like there's always this sense of history is kind of over and I've arrived at who I'm going to be. Oh, right. But yet when we look back, it's like, holy shit, I'm so excited about the next 10 years because I was a knucklehead 10 years ago. So I can only imagine I'm a knucklehead now. I just don't know yet. But 10 years from now, it's going to be awesome. But we have this psychological barrier to go, well, but this is me. Like this is who I am. And it's kind of not stagnant, but maybe status quo. But history would say that that's completely not true. It sounds a little bit what we're talking about here of even getting excited about, holy shit, I know I'm going to change a lot in the 10 years. How deliberate can I be about that maybe? Or how pointed can I be about where that ends up?
Well, I think the key word you just mentioned is deliberate. Like, how do you do this? Because part of it is discomfort. So you almost have to, it's embracing the discomfort of not knowing what's going to happen and really riding that out and actually putting yourself into awkward situations and then learning from that and reflecting and taking the path forward. I think it does require that reflection though. And you often need to do it with somebody else. And I'm going to say maybe not your spouse sometimes. Maybe someone who is.
I would argue that probably not your spouse sometimes for some of the initial work. I think that they need to be a source. But yeah, get don't hang wallpaper together or teach each other how to drive a standard car. I think this would fall into that category.
or identify your purpose. Yeah, so I add 3 to that now. But I think it's so true. So find somebody who's going to give us some good feedback and. But the cool thing about it is you get to, learn some new things, and maybe you need to learn a new skill, for example. Who knows? Lots of great opportunities out there.
Well, if you're lucky, you get to learn new skills. Just all about how you reframe it. Like, being uncomfortable though is like that's avoided. But we all know on paper, academically, that's where the most change happens. But yet we try to put us in the padded room. It's you're not learning much. You're not going forward. But how do you make it uncomfortable enough that you're learning, not getting discouraged and checking out? Like there is a fine line there too, right? You go too deep into the pool, and I love to swim, but you throw me in the middle of the ocean, I'm probably going to have a bad day.
Yeah. And your original point about mindset. So it's like having that mindset. There's a book called Mindset, actually, and it's about having a growth mindset. And what do I need to do?
Growth versus fixed, right? Is the alternative fixed versus growth mindset.
And so if I adopt that and I try something and I don't like it or I fail, I just learn something. I learn something I don't like. So I know we do that, and my wife and I do that a lot.
Yeah, versus this right or wrong, pass or fail kind of mindset. Again, we love to intellectualize. Failure is great, but no one likes to fail. So it's a tricky sword for sure. There's both sides that are easily fallen upon.
Oh, it absolutely is. Yeah.
Thoughts on, and I'll speak to the male narrative because I think you and I might be qualified to speak on that. I won't touch on the female side, but
Sure.
is there a bigger challenge, or is the challenge different? I'd say bigger, worse, different for men? Because I think I just look at my dad, that there was a narrative they were given of you follow a certain rule book and at the end it'll look like this. And I know a lot of men that it didn't look like that. And whether there was a divorce or there was something in the family that happened or a business or they exited. My dad was a farmer, and old farmers do not retire. They just do something else, or else they literally shrivel up. And I remember when my dad transitioned, my sister and I were like, oh my God, how's this going to go? And surprisingly, moved to a new area, found a new community, bought a whole bunch more tractors. So he felt good and cuts wood, and, he's in his late 70s and he's in the bush every day doing his thing. But that was rough. And I see some of the gentlemen that were in his life that all of a sudden they've become this broken down version of themselves. They were so unable to change. And it definitely felt like, but I know a lot of women in that same age category, they seem to have went more non-for-profit, more in community work. Like I've seen, I'm painting some stereotypes, but I also want to be real about it. Is there a different narrative sometimes for men in that bracket, age-wise?
Well, there is. And some of the research suggests two things: that women, when they hit that zone, they're a little bit better at networking, better at connecting with community, better at doing something volunteering. Men, unfortunately, are retiring to TV and booze. And there's a lot of alcoholism that happens after
retirement. I don't care how old you are, nothing good comes of that.
I know. And
booze and TV. Oh goodness.
It's a bad combo.
And throw in a little Facebook and your day is really off to the races.
And then, one of the worst things now is it perpetuates loneliness. And there's been
which really is a mental health concern.
Absolutely. But just recently they were saying that being lonely is equivalent, I think, to smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day on your health.
Because I've heard sitting is the new smoking. So lonely is the new smoking as well. I like that. I'm going to say that to somebody later today. I'm like, hey, you know what I heard today from my friend Steve?
Lonely is the new smoking. But there's tons of research suggesting that if you're lonely, it's going to certainly increase your propensity to get sick. And it's, I think it's a spiral. I hear the opposite stories of the people who are starting businesses, friends of mine whose parents have just kind of retreated to nowhere. And often it's like you said, it's a divorce or maybe a spouse has died, and it's loneliness. But it's hard to get out of that. It's really hard. So maybe that can be prevented if in advance you think about, one of the terms we thought of was, maybe search for something instead of someone to have a great life. So
tell me more.
So for example, let's say you want to help people. Well, search for something. Maybe it's volunteering. And I'll use the Calgary Food Bank because I know they have 700 volunteers every week there. So the something for me is that I want to, help people. And the someone is I'm going to meet people when I'm there, but I'm not trying to find a person. I'm not trying to create my own little kind of network of friends. I'm trying to find something to do that the outcome is that I have a group of friends. I've tried that, where you try to get a group of guys together, for example, and it's really hard to make it happen. But if I'm searching for something like, okay, now I'm gonna be a mentor, for example, and I'm around other mentors. Now I've got some connections. So still working on that concept, to be honest, but I think there's a dramatic difference between spouses, and even when the spouses are both alive, where one can all of a sudden become very busy and the other one is not, and it can create some resentment and some challenges. So I think you need to do stuff together. You need to do stuff separate, but find something you love to do, some kind of passion.
What I'm also hearing you say, and something my wife and I have been married 20 years, so we have, that as a track record, is never forget to grow as individuals. And then you tend to come together. And you're right, there often is I have some older friends, and there's clearly some codependency going on there. And it's hard. You've been married 40 years. Yeah. There's a narrative and there's a rhythm you get into. But when one starts going down a path and the other pulls back, that can almost make the one feel even more like they're missing out and feel like they're left out. And there's a mental health narrative that gets started. But I love the searching for something versus someone, because let's just talk about the food bank. I volunteer at the food bank. By default, I'm there with like-minded individuals because we're all taking our most valuable asset, which is time, and we're giving it to something. And you're going to end up packing food baskets beside somebody. And, when you go on the search for someone, that can almost be, that sounds like networking. That sounds like, I don't like that. But I'm going to go do something I care about. And I'll probably run into other people that care about that thing.
Yeah.
Because it is about common ground sometimes, right?
It absolutely is. And I think that's, it's just something to consider as we, there's nothing stopping us from doing it any time during our lives, but it does make a difference, and you create these networks of people that, maybe I have a volunteer group. Maybe guess what I'm doing woodworking now. I have a buddy who's now a beekeeper. And you know what? He's got a bunch of friends who are beekeepers. So, and honestly, you would have never thought this guy would be a beekeeper. So
that's so funny.
I'm jealous, actually.
Well, finding friends that also have like projects and properties and things to do, they're always looking for a hand.
Absolutely.
That's the one advantage. I think that's also, I grew up in a rural environment. I live in the city, and you and I chatted in my idea. So I just purchased a rural property, and people are like, oh, you go to do work to relax. I'm like, well, I go to do something that's completely different from what I do in my daily life. Yeah. So it allows me to kind of bring this other part of me alive that I'm like, oh, all of a sudden now I'm like, oh, I kind of have a vision of the next 10 or 15 years, where before is like, my city life and my knowledge worker and my running my business I love. But all of a sudden this thing showed up that was completely different, but somehow filled me up in a different way. And intentional, but a little bit by accident. I kind of put myself out there and went, I like this more than I thought I did, but I had to kind of put my toe in the water, right?
Yeah, which is fantastic. You've done that. I mean, you're doing everything that we're talking about.
Thank you. Yeah. I just can't see it. One of my financial guys asked me the other day, he goes, so Tyler, what are you thinking about retirement? I laughed, and maybe it was last week, so I knew this conversation was coming. I said, to do what different than I'm doing now? He's like, oh, if that's your narrative, he goes, we're good. I won't bring it up again for at least another 5 years. I'll just park it. So I was like, what would I do different? Maybe a little bit less of this and maybe a little bit more, going on the tractor and doing farm stuff. But otherwise, it's pretty much what I would do. But I didn't really thought about it that way until someone threw the word at me as a question. I was like, it kind of took me back for a second.
No, it's true. It's very true.
I've been puzzling it a little bit ever since. So let's talk about the financial side a little bit, because I think a lot of people are like, this all sounds great, but I got to make more money. I don't have enough. I've also have friends that I'm like, well, how much is enough? Well, I don't know, but I don't have enough. How important is it to actually, like you rhymed off some of those numbers? Like, is that part of this journey? Like, aside from purpose, and I recognize that that's separate from finances, but sometimes there is just the mechanics of life costs money. Things cost money.
Absolutely. And I lately in the media, they've been saying 1.7 million to retire. That's a number that they've used through the Bank of Montreal. I think what we're trying to do is look at it a little bit differently. Instead of having a pot of money that you withdraw from, why don't you have a pot of money you put money into, and save that? Even if you don't necessarily need it, maybe you put $1,000 or $2,000 a month into a pot from working part time, and that will certainly alleviate a lot of fear people have of running out of money. But it's just a different way to look at it, I think. And I think banks are going to start getting around that concept. They're talking about raising the retirement age in Canada, potentially. Whether they do or not, I don't know. But they're talking about making it 68. And
what is it now? Is it 65 or 66?
65, but technically it's like 71 is like the maximum year when you have to retire or do something or get an annuity, And the rule, I'm certainly not a financial expert. And
that's tied to RSPs, and that's tied to when you're forced to pull money out, and it's tied to a lot of things.
Yeah. So maybe what we're trying to do is like, okay, let's think about everything here. If I do my purpose and I realize that, I want to travel, let's say, some of my passion, but I need some money to do that. Well, how do I do that? So it's a process where you'd say, okay, I want to keep making some money. And maybe just keep $1,000 a month. I don't know, to take the edge off, for example. I don't know. It's so different.
I appreciate though what you're saying is let's change the narrative from this all or nothing kind of thing. Like I've got zero and now I have to go strictly off, basically live off my interest and hopefully not deplete my capital before I run out of time horizon. Where some of the paranoia could come in, and inflation, and like we're all notoriously bad at predicting the future. Everyone is notoriously bad.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it's something that people need to consider for
sure. Have you read The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel?
No, I haven't.
I just read it. I highly recommend it. It's a great book about finances, and they don't talk at all about money, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
It's all about the psychology and the mindset and they have lots of examples of individuals, like they use Warren Buffett a little bit about how the bulk of his wealth wasn't accumulated until after 65 years old
Yeah.
from a handful of specific investments, and just really managing the psychology of what you're trying to accomplish, staying in the game for the long term, the power of compound interest, like a lot of the fundamentals that won't blow your mind, but it's written in a way that's like, huh. And he uses nice little punchy talking points. You're like, you know what? That's a good point. Like, that's a really good slight shift in even how we think about it. Because I think we're also so often very poorly equipped to how to even think about quote unquote money.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, there's so many uncertainties right now with inflation and, condo fees and like it's everywhere, right? I mean, things are just being thrown and potential, there's a potential now of taxing capital gains on your primary residence, right? So
Yes.
if that happens,
The government's looking for its pound of flesh, but
oh,
that's another podcast for another
that'll
day.
change. That'll be such a bad change in Canada if that happens, where people are relying on their capital gains from their home to retire. Imagine if they have to pay 40% tax on that.
And that's been a narrative that's been told and promoted. And
Yeah,
like, that's a smart way. And that's and so many people I know, a good chunk of their wealth is tied up in their primary residence.
absolutely.
And then let's not like all those people that had that condo they bought that they were going to Airbnb that now they can't Airbnb. I got a
Exactly.
friend who's not that old and he just got caught in Kelowna, and all of a sudden he's like, oh shit, like it's not big enough for my primary residence. The market has dropped off and I can't rent it out anymore. And that was part of one of my, like,
Yes.
this is a smart move. You can't go wrong with this smart real estate play. And they just changed the bylaw. Like that, those are the kind of left hooks that can be really discouraging when you're on the journey, right?
And I think having a plan where you're going to, put money into the bucket changes that. It changes the dynamic. And although we don't talk about financial planning necessarily, we talk about the concept of, and
Well, it's the mindset around it, right? There's financial
yeah,
planners. There's lots of people out there. That's what I love about that book. I couldn't recommend it more highly because it's all about mindset, and it's the psychology of money, literally. And it gives so many, it's the book everyone should read when they're 20 that they probably wouldn't get, but you should read it because you'll be on the right path to go,
you're supposed to read books in our 20s.
yeah, well, fair. Yes. Touche.
I don't think
You mean
I
I've
did
been
that.
thinking about it all wrong this whole time? Maybe. Well, not maybe wrong, but not as effective as possible.
Yeah, I'll certainly look at it.
So co-founder at Disrupt Retirement. Is this a movement? Is this a book? Is this a course? Well, clearly it's a passion. So I love that.
Yeah.
But from a business perspective, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's kind of yes to all your questions there.
Right on.
What we're really doing is we're putting together a course or a program, and it's around helping people identify the purpose and to really plan. And that's the goal. We're going to do it through a conference. So we'll have a conference to bring people together, bring guest speakers together. Here's some inspiring stories of people that have
community. Yeah. So a lot big community aspect.
Absolutely, and so what we'll have a book. But the one thing we're also going to be doing is helping to create retirement teams with people. So like say for example, you come to this conference, we'll put you on a team of 6 people, and you're going to help each other. So if you're on my team, I'm going to say, here's my plan. And you're going to say, that's a dumb plan. That's a great plan. Let me help you get there. And so you will create these mentoring groups, hopefully alleviate some of the loneliness that's happening, help people create networks, and share some best practices. So that's that.
Well,
and
you're stepping right into the loneliness risk, like reducing that loneliness risk, which then has a cascading series of negative effects like mental health and physical health and all the things. Mm-hmm.
And the big, hairy, audacious goal is we're trying to put a TV series together.
Fantastic! Netflix, like the Blue Zones kind of thing, but it's the retirement
very much
zone.
like the Blue Zones. Yeah,
totally.
Or there's one in Edmonton. It's called How to Cheat Death, and it's so same sort of format.
I love a good catchy title. I love it. Tell me more about this cheating death business.
It's a good one. Yeah. But what we're trying to do is get the information out, and it's changing the narrative. And I know it's going to be a challenge, but I really would hope to hear someone say, "I'm sorry you're retiring." We would have won if someone says, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear you're retiring." Instead of getting a congratulations card, get a condolences card.
That is funny. So, sorry to hear about your retirement. Excited to hear what you're doing next. Give me a call. Let's have a coffee and talk about it. I like the, I've been in executive group for years with business leaders, kind of similar, where we call each other out, and they call it carefrontation. And having people in the room that care enough to confront you when you're about to step on a landmine. I heard a little carefrontation in your model, which I love. So if you feel like co-opting that word, I'd recommend it. I love that word because because only if you do care enough will you confront someone about something like that.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise it's easier just to go, oh, that's nice. like, hey, I'm like, you can be soft about it. I'm curious. I wonder, is that actually, do you think that's actually going to work out? What do that
Yeah.
confrontation model, I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, I'll have to
And
admit,
sometimes strangers do better at it than the people close to you.
one of my biggest inspirations is Colonel Sanders. That story. He
Hmm.
started that at 65, and he was a billionaire by 82, but he loved his chicken. Like
And
it's
literally hustling it door to door to get somebody
door to
to
door,
go. Yeah,
absolutely
that's
living
a
in his
great story.
car. And
You can learn a lot from biographies can be very inspiring.
oh yeah, and so back to this mindset concept. It's like looking around and just looking at all the people around us that are doing this and sharing those stories, because we don't hear about them very often, honestly. And so
Yeah.
hopefully with this,
It's not what catches the headlines, the same.
no, it's not. So hopefully with this movement, it can get people to start listening, talking about it. I can tell you one thing: when I talk to people, it's amazing to see the response and how
Mm.
it really resonates with people.
Well, you're
You
giving
know,
them a new way to think about an old thing.
yeah,
And
it's
there's a lot to be said for that.
I
And I love it from a business model perspective. We're all heading, we're all heading that direction.
we
You have
are,
an unlimited
yeah.
supply of fresh new ideal customer profiles.
it's it's a very it's absolutely growing demographic, but it's
It is. And it's
uh
interesting when you talk about, seen a few speakers lately talking about some of the challenges we have globally around demographics, and we've got more old and we've got young. And I wonder how much that narrative, and I know there's some very clear science around, if you don't have a strong, if you don't have, if you have the upside down bell versus the proper, like how it looks, if you look at those demographics,
yeah.
portraits of how big your young generation is, but if the older generation completely changes how they engage economically, if they take
Hmm.
care of themselves and they're in better shape, so there's less burden on the medical system. Like, I know that demographics are, what is it? It's the predicting the future by the study of the past, to a certain, or I forget something. It's something to that degree. It's like it's knowing the future based very clearly on what has happened.
Hmm.
But what if that 55 means something different than it has in the past, from a healthcare perspective,
Exactly.
from a revenue perspective, or 65 or 75 means something different? Because if we're not growing more young people, we better start looking at how us as the older generation interact very differently, which was, well, you get to this age, you're going to be this burden on the system, and this many percentage will run out of money. And what if we changed all that? Like, it feels like our only way to disrupt the fact that we're just not making as many new humans in some of our societies as we used
Absolutely.
to.
Well, here's an interesting another piece. The government of Alberta has a project going on right now, and it's about ageism in the workplace, and they use
Mm.
45 as the start of ageism. So imagine that. Okay, when I
Sweet baby Jesus, I feel old, Steve.
yeah, you're 5 years past your prime. All I can tell you. But
Out to pasture. That's pasture. I'm
uh,
a business owner, so maybe that's somehow just to like make there's a different narrative there. But whatever. I'll spin whatever narrative I need to keep to keep positive with my day.
yeah, but I think it's it's exactly about getting people to just let's change, and employers as well. By the way, there are a
Yeah.
number of employers who want to be able to retain employees as they retire, but they don't have the model to do it right now. Like they can't do the contracting 1 day a week, or um, and so there needs to be also a mind shift within corporations. All of that there's a brain drain there for sure. And you get these incredibly talented people that are going to retire. They don't want to retire. They want to work a day a week. I want to
Yeah,
call it
and
in
they've
now.
got the experience. But it's
Yeah,
interesting narrative when I think what that 60-year-old, I'm just picking a number, or 55-year-old wants is not that different when that than what that 35-year-old wants. They want
yeah,
autonomy,
yeah.
they want agency, they want independence, they want a custom experience. They will give their value, but they don't want to be treated like a rank and file number. There's a lot of
So true.
similarities there, I think, where you're right. And I'm a corporation and I have 10,000 employees. It's hard to personalize. But
Yeah.
yet we have a society, and whether it's the phone in my hand or the world I live in, I demand personalization.
Mhm.
And so I look at oftentimes people like, oh, the millennials or the Gen X's and Gen Z's. I'm like, they kind of just want to be treated the way I want to be treated now. I can't really force them
Yeah.
or fault them for wanting to have autonomy and wanting to feel included and wanting to get good feedback. Like, these aren't unrealistic demands, in my
No,
opinion.
no. And they want
But
to have
no,
a
you
good
don't
life, right?
deserve that. You got to pay your dues. I'm like, that narrative is bullshit.
Talk to me in
I
40
don't like, I
years.
never
Yeah.
liked that narrative either. That's why I became
Oh,
self-employed, because I couldn't deal with it as an employee. I was like, I'm out of here. I can't deal with this bullshit.
yeah. No, it's important. It's such an important time to get people to think like you're talking about, because it is bullshit, really. Especially if you've gone through it. So I've gone through it, and I look back and think, man, I wish I would have done something on my own a long time ago. You know,
Yeah, right on.
but
And it's
okay.
risky and it's scary.
Yeah.
But I joked. Someone asked me the other day, when did you know you were self-employed? I'm like, I think '02 was the last time I got a paycheck. I'm like, well, even if I do crash, I want to be driving, right? I don't want to be in the backseat going, I think
I
we're going to
like
crash.
I
Hey,
like that.
shut up back there. You're too young. I'm not going to listen to you. I think we're going to hit a tree. I don't know. I at least want to be driving and some whatever weird rationale that is.
Oh, I love that.
Um,
That's so true.
I could not touch on it, but the health and fitness side, like the taking care of yourself side,
Mhm.
I think it's mandatory, but I'm fortunate that I have that mindset. I know a lot of individuals, when I have time, then I'll start taking care of myself. That is definitely becomes a diminishing, like the hourglass can run out. So thoughts, advice on that? Like, is that just table stakes?
No, absolutely it is, and it's really about identifying appropriate things for people, and maybe we don't fit in some of the buckets that currently exist. But that's the body part of the formula we have is brain, body, and heart. So brain
Mm.
is the work, or the heart is the relationship, and body, of course, is body. It's really
Is the
about
vehicle that carries it all
yeah,
around?
yeah, even now something as simple as mindfulness and breathing that you can do, or um,
It's free. It's free. It's free.
exactly, yeah, air is free. So I mean, and so it's absolutely a focus. So it's looking at those three, and they're all interconnected, of course. But you don't necessarily have to be physically healthy anymore to work because of we're working from
Yeah.
home now. So that's an
Well,
incredible
the
opportunity.
age of knowledge workers creates a whole
Yeah,
different thing. But I would still argue that the healthier the vessel is that you carry it around in, the better everything else goes. But
absolutely.
I have a bias, and I it's a non-negotiable for me, and so it's never like, oh, I'm never going to fall out of the habit of it, because I know just mentally it just doesn't work for me. I need to do it, but I created that habit early in my life when I maybe had time, and
Mhm.
wasn't willing to give up when I kind of could have easily told the story that I didn't have time.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I just 2 days ago, I was walking by a park and I saw a group of about 30 people going for a hike, all over the age of 60. And I thought, like, what a great way to spend some time and to connect. And they were all pretty excited, had their poles were
Back
all
to the
ready to
something,
go.
this back to the something and the someone, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's something hiking
And
and
they got their
someone.
hiking poles and all their gear. And yeah,
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
they were
I
all
can
geared
picture
out.
it.
That it was so it's an excellent question. And I think it's all together. So it definitely it's the brain, the body, and the heart. And you have to address all three.
Mhm. I really appreciate the conversation, the dialogue just around, even when the word comes up, someone will say retirement in my executive group. I'm like, can we make sure that when you even say the word, I want you to define what you think it means, because I bristle at it, but like, it's one of those lost language words like, oh yeah, retirement. Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Do
Yeah,
you, do I, should I, it feels like it is ripe for disruption. If it to disrupt retirement, it is clearly no longer serving us. And it's amazing how, like, how much we hold on to something we don't even know where it came from, or
absolutely.
even
And
why.
yeah, and there's kind of movement to try and change the word, to like rehirement and so on. But you know what? We need to just change the word, change the meaning, make it
Yeah,
a bit more flexible, and you know just change the way we talk about it. I think that would be very helpful.
I agree. Well, see, you're clearly living your passion. You're clearly, um, in a space where this seems to energize you. I chatted with you last time. You had energy coming out of the mic, and I felt that again today. And
That's great.
again, this is available to all of you when you live when you live the purpose. It's the infomercial a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I think it needs to give people just an inkling, and I hope that's why I do this podcast. Like, you know what? Maybe I'm going to start thinking about that differently. Maybe I'm going to be curious about it. So that's all you can really ask, as we're all
absolutely.
kind of, I reserve the right to think differently tomorrow based on what I learned today.
That's an
How
excellent
do
point.
people learn more? How do they find out? Like, what's the internet is a vast place. How do they find you? Mm.
Yeah, well, we've launched a series of videos already through my LinkedIn profile.
Oh,
Just
cool. Nice.
and we're going to continue to launch those. Working on getting that. Have a meeting tomorrow actually about this TV series concept, and we'll be
Amazing.
announcing a conference probably going to happen in May, and we'll be announcing it very
Oh, nice. So
soon.
the ball is rolling. This is all like in real time happening. That's fantastic.
Yeah, there's a website right now, but there's not much to it right now. It's disrupting retirement. .ca. But I'm going to say if someone's very interested in this, the easiest way is to reach out through my LinkedIn profile,
Okay.
and
Nice.
I can certainly provide lots of information. We started this last almost a year ago now, just gathering information, getting some research together, and really getting people learning about some stories about retirees. So yeah, that would be I would say right for now, it's the best way, but we're going to use LinkedIn as the primary platform to get this thing going because it is geared a lot towards maybe a corporate group of people
Yep.
that are working. And then from there, we have an Instagram account and we'll
All the things, but
we
yeah,
have all
LinkedIn
the
is
things. Like,
LinkedIn sounds like your preferred, and it's Brierley with an L-E-Y at the end.
yes, it
If
is.
someone
Yeah.
said Brierley, spelling matters,
Yes, it does. Yeah.
and really enjoyed having you on. Happy to, anyways, keep me informed. Happy to support it. I love it. I love any time they're like, hey, this is an old narrative, no longer serving. Let's reframe, let's retell the story, and let's create something that maybe is going to be a little more inclusive and a little more positive for everybody.
Yeah, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk about this because it's
That's fun.
just an important subject. So I appreciate that.
Amazing, Steve. Thank you so much. And I make this threat. I have a feeling we'll be chatting again.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it.